The problem with that is people love to do things their own way.
Mm,
And it's not that they even dislike or disagree with your process, but it's just, it's habit, right? People like to like they feel like if it's a habit that they will be more efficient doing their own way than kind of the other way. And that may be true
mhm.
for some amount of projects, but once you hit volume, which is very much what we do, that's no longer becomes true. Like you want to operate within the system that everyone else is operating in, and the system that we've proven out to be very efficient for our customers.
Well, welcome, Hope Horner.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here, Jessica.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you here. And so, Hope, what inspired you to start Lemon Light 11 years ago? What was that initial vision and mission that you had?
Yes. So our original mission was to make video content affordable and accessible to businesses of all sizes. In 2011, the average cost of a commercial was like $300,000 and really reserved for people with giant creative teams and big budgets to be able to produce them. And so we thought, okay, we were looking for an advertising solution for the SMB space, the small, medium-sized business market. And we thought, what's the most effective form of advertising? Our hypothesis was that video was big and getting bigger. And we thought, all right, if we can make it affordable and accessible, we think this could be really valuable for them and could be an interesting business.
And it kind of sounds a little bit, I was just reading an article earlier today about Canva and how that was really offering affordable tool. Did that inspire you at all? Do you feel like there's any similarities between what you have to offer and um, the Canva app?
That's really interesting. So when we started the business, no, Canva was not on our radar. I'm not even sure when they started. But today it's very much on our radar because of the software that we're building, or that we built that we're now going to basically take outside of Lemon Light. Right now, we use it to power our own internal productions, but ultimately making it
Mhm.
easy for any marketer, any person to create a video from scratch. Whether it's live action where we're filming, whether it's an AI video, whether it's an animated video, giving basically empowering the individual, that works in a business or otherwise, the ability to create content from scratch really quickly and really easily, which is very similar to what Canva did with design.
Okay, wonderful. That's great. So you had mentioned that your background was in the ad tech and being an entrepreneur. So not really video production. So
That's
what
right.
made you decide to tackle the video production industry?
Yeah, it was really about the market, I would say. So my ad tech background basically allowed me to understand the various parts of the market and what solutions people were looking for. So, like what the SMB, the small medium, the pizza shop on the corner is looking for very different solutions than the enterprise brand than what Google's looking for. And when we started, we were very much trying to champion the small business, and so
Mhm.
it wasn't a passion at that moment, at least. It wasn't a passion about video for me as much as it was just solutions and giving great businesses access to great tools. And so that's how we started. It was really a hypothesis. We thought, all right, we think if we can make it affordable and accessible, we think we can sell it to businesses. And that's what we did. The first month we were in business, we had no idea how to make a video. We literally just went out and started selling it.
Mhm.
And we sold like quite a few businesses that first month, like maybe like 12, which felt like a lot for us back then.
Yeah.
And at the end of that month, we were like, all right, we got to figure out how to make videos because now we have to create all this content. And so that was me and my first co-founder, Chad. And then in that first 3 days, we immediately brought on our third co-founder, Daniel, who has the video production background. He was basically a freelance videographer at the time, working with some of the similar brands that we were selling to. And so we came together to start creating content, the video content itself.
And so how did you find these co-founders?
So just along the way, so Chad and I worked together when I was like in my early 20s, just a few short years ago, um, at Equinox doing sales. And then Dana and I met
Okay.
through friends later, when I was like in my mid 20s. And he and I did some work together for my first startup company, for some video work. And so I
Mhm.
knew that he was in that world and had the capacity and capabilities of creating the content that we were selling. And we'd stayed in touch. We became friends through that experience. And so he was the first person I immediately was like dragged into this whole experience.
And how has it been creating a company with the three of you?
A lot harder. early on. Um,
Uh-huh.
you know, Starting a business, especially in the early days, is brutal. We did not raise any outside funding for the first 8 years. So we were completely bootstrapped, which is incredibly stressful, especially when you're trying to grow. And I mean, we all cared about pretty different things. Daniel was really, not that we cared about the customer at the end of the day, but like Daniel was really focused on the quality of the video, right? Well, if you make the highest quality video, that's going to be more expensive. I was really focused on making sure that we were running an operational business, right? So margins were important to me and making sure we were doing things efficiently. Chad was worried about sales back then and how to sell as many customers as possible. So trying to find that balance took a while. Like we were selling videos for $500 that we had to travel to like other parts of the country for. Like it made no sense. And it took us a while to sort of massage out all of those kinks and understand, okay, how do we make this a viable business that makes sense for all of us, that kind of it creates the efficiencies across all the different departments. But it was hard.
Hmm.
I mean, there were
Okay.
screaming matches back in the day.
Well, it sounds like you all grew together. You're all still involved in the organization. Is that correct?
We are. Yep. Very much every day.
Okay. Any other co-founders that have joined you since then or partners?
No, it's just the three of us, but now our team is large, or larger. It's over 100 folks and thousands of freelancers. And so we really lean heavily on our executive team to help us run the business and make those decisions and figure out kind of our next best steps.
Okay, that's great. So you mentioned that when you first started out, you were bootstrapping, and then you did eventually get funding. So were you able to grow with bootstrapping, and what made you decide to do the funding route?
We doubled revenue every year for those first 8 years, which,
Mhm.
which was hard because every dollar that we made, we put back into the business and sometimes dollars that we weren't making. But it also forced us to be operationally efficient. Like we couldn't just spend $1 million that we didn't have, like it didn't exist. And so I feel like those early days really taught us how to be like scrappy, of course, but also smart, being really calculated with the risks that
Mhm.
we were taking, really understanding the unit economics of our business and our customers and the channels that we were getting customers and how much, every dollar that we spent earned, based on where we were putting those dollars. So that was really helpful. It was really painful, but it was really helpful as we continued to grow and start making more money. And then in 2022, we knew we wanted to build out some technology to help kind of take us to the next level. And so we decided to bring on an outside partner to help us do that so that we could continue to grow, invest in the growth side with our profits, and then also build out a technology team with the money that we had raised.
Okay, wonderful. So that brings you to essentially where you are now, I would imagine.
Yes. Yes. So today we have a full technology team and the software that we built that basically powers every part of our business, especially on the production side.
Okay, great. So, can you share more about the challenges you faced in the early days of building Lemon Light and how did you overcome those obstacles?
Yes. There are a lot of challenges. I will name a few and then I'll tell you pretty much I deal with all of them kind of the same way. So number one is
Okay.
balancing supply and demand. And that's just basic econ 101. But when you're talking about balancing the
Mhm.
supply, meaning like how many people you're hiring, how many paychecks you have to write, and the demand, which is how many customers you're able to get, those numbers become
Mhm.
extremely important, right? And it's not only how many customers you're selling, but it's how quickly are we turning over those projects so that they're actually paying us for those services. So, and on top of that, trying to consistently grow, right? If we wanted to stay flat, it would be a lot easier to manage, but because we were trying to grow, um, I mean, since inception, you have to try to forecast how many producers you're going to need, how many editors you're going to need. This is back in the day, um, you know, months in advance. Then we could hire for those, and we could get people trained up, and we could get people ready to be able to handle the customer volume that we planned on. And then if you miss that customer volume, then you're in a different pickle. So that was a
Mm,
big thing. That was a big challenge that I feel like is sort of was like always running in the background those first 5 to 7 years. The
okay.
next, probably the first 5 years for sure. Then we just got better at it a little bit. Um, the next big challenge is hiring, right? I mean, people say this all the time, like hiring is gonna be the hardest thing that you ever do, or like knowing when the person isn't the right fit. Um, And it's extremely important because it's so impactful to the business. And I really underestimated this at the beginning. We had
Mhm.
limited resources, so we were very scrappy in who we hired and how we hired. But knowing what I know now, I would do it completely differently, for sure. Um, I would I would have brought on fewer, more qualified people to
Mhm.
get the same amount of work done better. But I didn't know that back then. We were all doing our best. We were hiring, like, our team was like a like 20 straight out of college people, like, including, I was, in my mid 20s too, just all trying to figure out how to run this business. So that was a lot of lessons learned, hard. And the other challenge, specifically in our industry, I think, was trying to fight the industry as a whole. You see this a lot
Okay.
with different kinds of tech companies where they are fighting kind of the industry norms within their industry. And there's a lot of backlash at first. I mean, the obvious ones are like Uber and some of the big guys, Airbnb. But we experienced that too. We started this business with the mission of democratizing video content creation. And that did not go well for us. We were with a
Mhm.
lot of our creators. They were very used to, crews operating a certain way at certain sizes, doing things in a very kind of like traditional kind of commercial production fashion. And when you're selling
Mhm.
videos for $500 or $2,000, which is what we eventually raised the price to, you can't do that. Like, you can't have 15 people on set. And
Right.
so that was a big challenge for us too, was like trying to, we were the first of our kind in the space, and we got a lot of backlash from that, like, a lot. And now it's kind of the norm. A lot of companies operate like we do, but that was really challenging at first as well.
Can you talk to me more about that? So, that's really interesting. It sounds like your clients, your prospective clients had a whole crew and that's what they were used to. And now you're selling maybe more affordable videos, video production packages for with less support. So it sounds like a mindset shift for your clients. Is that
Yep.
correct?
For our clients and our crew, for both. um,
And the crew.
yeah.
Okay.
And basically, we just had to prove that we could do it and do it well. And it never got
Yep.
easier until we had hundreds of examples saying, like, look, trust us, like, we know how to do it this way.
Hmm.
You got to give us a chance. And then we can, like, we've made tens of thousands of videos at this point. Like, we know how to operate like that. And like I said, it's more normal these days, but for a long time it was not.
Okay. And so for other people who, for our audience who's watching and wanting to disrupt the industry, whatever industry that is, and they're finding kind of the same thing, maybe their employees, their prospective clients or customers, needing to have some sort of mindset shift. Where did the rubber hit the road in being able to get some traction with your clients and crew? You mentioned the 100 examples, but even along the way, in order to get that 100 examples, what helped
Yeah.
you
You
and
have
your
to remove
team?
the risk as much as possible. And so to get those first examples, we did them for free or for very cheap. And then we underpriced our services. I don't know if this was really as strategic. Like, in hindsight, I see that it worked this way, but I don't know if we were actually this intentional when we were doing it. But our prices were so cheap that people were willing to take the risk, because it was like, well, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And then when it did work and it was, inexpensive, then we had a lifetime customer. And over time, again, those prices kind of balanced out, but you have to remove the risk, and you have to, if it's offering some sort of guarantee to customers, if you don't like it, we'll fix it. We used to offer unlimited revisions for everything for years. And that made people feel
Mm,
better. And when you can make it just be like, you're just, those very, very early days, you're just trying to get the customer to be like, all right, I'll give it a try. Like, that's kind of the best case scenario when you're a brand new company. And then eventually that shifts into, like,
mhm.
people being excited to work with you, but you just got to get them over that barrier by de-risking the situation. More reward.
Okay. Okay. That's great. Wonderful. That's great advice. So you spoke about the importance of processes and structure in the creative field. Can you elaborate on how you implemented that at Lemon Light and the impact it had or has had?
Yes. So we produce a lot of content these days, thousands of videos a month. Back in the day it was even hundreds before we had any technology. And the only way to do that is by making things as systematic as possible. I believe there are four types of leadership, and people tend to kind of gravitate towards one of the four. For me, I'm a process
Mhm.
first leader, so I believe, that, even though I know it's not fundamentally only the truth, but I believe that most problems can be solved with better process. Um, and so I've always operated that way. And so to do that, specifically what we did was we created templates for everything, literally everything, everything from phone scripts to email templates to um, call sheet templates to set note templates, the things that the directors are getting. We created standardized documents for every single part of our business. And then we created processes that connected all of those templates and pieces. We in the early days, it was literally like a document that we were copying and pasting. Then we got more sophisticated and we were using tools like um, Gmail templates, and then eventually HubSpot, and creating workflows with HubSpot. And then eventually connect, like this is, the evolution, right? Connecting the different softwares together. So like HubSpot connects to Monday.com that knows when to trigger the email. And then eventually, we built our own software, which is now obviously very customized. But it's the same principle, right? It's just templatizing as much as possible,
Mhm.
being really clear about where people need to fill in the gaps, and then training people and creating that accountability around those structures. The problem with that is people love to do things their own way.
Mm.
And it's not that they even dislike or disagree with your process, but it's just, it's habit, right? People like to, like, they feel like if it's a habit that they will be more efficient doing their own way than kind of the other way. And that may be true
Mhm.
for some amount of projects, but once you hit volume, which is very much what we do, that's no longer becomes true. Like, you want to operate within the system that everyone else is operating in, and the system that we've proven out to be very efficient for our customers. And so that's one thing we're pretty staunch on, I would say. But it doesn't come without challenges. They also have to evolve constantly. Like, that's the problem with processes. When you're building really robust processes, they become outdated, and then to fix them is like a whole lot. So we've done that a few times, or many times. But I think it's about templatizing as much as possible. And look, when you're creating a video, like, every video is going to look completely different, no matter how templated the process is. The video itself is going to be different because what you're actually capturing on camera is going to be different. But every step is templated for us.
Okay. And so how do you sell the idea of using your templates and your processes to new employees who are coming on?
Yeah. So I always think about this question, even more broadly. It's like, how do you get someone to do what you want, right? At work. How do you get someone to do the things that you think are best? And you
Mhm.
have to show them it's valuable for them. It's really the only way. Like, it does not matter, sticks, carrots, it doesn't matter. If you cannot show them that it's valuable, they will eventually find a way around it and do it their own way. Um,
Mm.
and so it's really good. Like, I think that because we think like that, it forces us to make sure that things are valuable and helpful, and we're not just sort of throwing band-aids on things. But that's the
Mhm.
truth. At the end of the day, if it's not creating value for the end user, they're not going to do it. And so you have to work with them and work with them and work with them until it makes sense for everyone.
And so you talked a little bit about the evolution of your processes, and it sounds like you have a lot of templates for everything, and it may be more automated now, but when it was less automated, how did you organize everything? Because of course you want to make things accessible for your
Yeah.
employees so that it's not another reason that they don't use it.
Yes. I would love to, like, we created SOPs, which, like, I didn't even know what an SOP was when I started this business. I don't even know what it was called originally. We didn't call it an SOP, but now that's what it technically is. We had Google Docs, and the Google Doc would walk through in linear order every step that they would take. And it would say, here's the template. Here's when you send it. Here's the subject line. If the client says this, here are links to four other things you might need to say instead.
Mm.
It was it was unbelievable how much documentation we had around things. We eventually migrated everything into Notion, which is far better. And that's also when we, like, kind of rehauled everything. But it's not science. Like, it's just writing things down and be as clear as possible.
Hmm.
and then just try to get people to do it. And then when they're doing it, watch them, do it with them, understand what's working, understand what's not working, do it yourself, ask them what they think, how they can make it better, and then you have to just iterate.
Hmm. And so, as you're talking about watching them, from what I understand, the bulk of your employees are in office in Los Angeles. Is that correct? So it's easier to watch their processes and make sure that they're following everything.
Yes. So our team is primarily based in Los Angeles. I would say 95% of us. Um,
Okay.
and but then we work with thousands of freelancers all around the globe.
Hmm.
And that's
Hmm.
obviously a lot harder, but it's the same idea. They get templated onboarding, like hiring, training, onboarding, offboarding, what they do after every single production, how we get the feedback from them every single time. Everything has a process. Um, And so, and yeah, but in the opposite, of course, it's a lot easier because when something doesn't work or something doesn't make sense, you can look at someone and they're going to be like annoyed. You can see their frustration on their face and you can walk up and be like, hey, what's going on? Talk to me. And they're like, this doesn't make any sense ever. This email never makes sense anymore because customers don't buy this product anymore or whatever. And so
Mm.
you fix things a lot faster.
Okay. And you're working with a lot of creatives, and sometimes creatives want to do things fluidly. They want to be creative, right? They want to infuse things with their ideas. But from what I understand, you've gotten positive feedback from creatives and in having these processes. Can you talk to me about that?
Yes. So to be clear, like I think the benefit is that you're automating and creating structure around the pieces that no one really likes that much anyways, is the truth. We're not templating the scripts that we're writing. We're not templating, the way that we're editing videos. What we're templating is all of the structure that's leading up to get the information that we need to be able to write that script in the first place. What we're doing with that script after it's written and how we're sending it to customers. So I think what we found is that the creatives really like being able to focus more on the creative pieces and less on the all the other stuff. It gives them more time to do the parts that they love. I think we found that along the way, even on set. Like we're very like you're a lot of times in production you're kind of hired to do multiple roles, and we've never done that. Like we hired the DP to be the DP, the editor to be the editor, and so on. um and we found that people like that structure more because they're able to do the thing that they like the most. And I think it's kind of the same concept. Like when they're not having to do the pieces that they don't like, they're more engaged and they create better output for the parts that they do like.
Okay, that's great. That sounds like a supportive environment for creatives to do well and to be successful.
That's our goal, right? If for us to be successful as a company, our clients have to like the content, and for the clients to like the content, the creative has to be great. And we know that, and we want to support the people who are those great creatives behind that great creative.
Hmm. Wonderful. And from what I understand, you work with a lot of big brands too, not just small businesses. Is that correct?
We do. We primarily work with mid-sized market enterprise brands now. We still serve the SMB
Hmm.
space. It's just a little bit less of our market share. But we do. We have, honestly, a lot of the biggest brands in the world, like enterprise brands. Amazon's probably our biggest partner.
That's wonderful. So, in terms of being successful for yourself and going for your dream, can you talk to me about work life balance? We hear that term being thrown around a bit, and especially how you've been able to incorporate that or what that experience has been for you as a creative driven entrepreneur and starting Lemon Light and having it a success over the past 11 years?
Um, yes, I definitely can. And I feel like my perspective and my opinions here are probably a little bit different than what you normally hear. And it is literally from my own experience. So for years and years, I was working, honestly, probably 70 or 80 hours a week, which was hard. And I was working full time. I loved it, is the truth. Like I was so excited about what we were building. I did not mind working that amount. But
Hmm.
I also was carrying this guilt of like, oh, I need to be more balanced. I need to have more friends, or I need to be doing this, or I should be doing that, or whatever. And so it made it feel bad all the time. And what I eventually realized is that that's not necessarily true. Um, And in hindsight, I mean, I wish I had known that then. I would have felt a lot better during those times. Um, but look, I believe that great success requires great sacrifice. I really do. And if you want to be great and you want to build something great, it's going to be extremely hard. And if you're more focused on finding that balance, like it's not that it can't be done. It's just that most of the stories that I hear from really successful entrepreneurs, that wasn't their priority in the early days. Their priority was that they were really excited about what they were building and they were also working all the time. If that's the experience that people are having, I think that you should like give yourself the space to have that part, like have this be part of your story. It won't be forever. Eventually, I did kind of hit a wall around year 10, actually. And I kind of had to refine a little bit different structure, but I don't regret I don't regret it one bit. And I think that it's important for people to understand like that's what sometimes it looks like. And to lean into it when you're feeling the motivation to do it.
Mm-hmm. And so when you hit that wall, was that burnout or was that just a realization that you wanted a different kind of experience or something else? What was that wall? What did that look like for you?
That was it was last year. It was the beginning of last year. And it started looking like demotivation.
Mm,
I love to work. I've always loved to work. I get so excited about spreadsheets and processes and like the things that most people do not get excited about. And I
mhm,
was waking up and there was none of that. I was like dreading every day. I would go to work and I would just sit at my desk because I was like, I don't know. It's like I couldn't even think of what to do. I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't want to do any of it if I can think of anything. I just want to escape. Um, and I don't know if I called it burnout then. What I identified at the time was that I worked really hard to build this life. And there were parts of it that I wasn't as excited about anymore. And I knew I needed a
mhm,
refresh. And so I did. I mean, I changed a lot of things in my life at that time. And then it was like 6 months of kind of recalibration. And that was hard because I wasn't as engaged at work. Like that's sort of an understatement. And my co-founders lifted me up, gave me the support I needed. It was kind of unspoken too. Like no one was really saying what was like very clearly happening, at least to me. Um, and they gave me the grace and the space to get my own life back together so that I could show back up again. And it did. I did. Eventually, like I came through it. I did a lot of things. I started working with a new executive coach. I stopped drinking. I started taking better care of myself physically. And I moved. Like there's a bunch of stuff I did that I knew I just needed to like I needed to shake things up. And it was really hard, honestly. I was a mess for a long time. But I got through it and now I'm kind of back engaged. And probably not working 80 hours a week right now, but I'm working a lot and I'm excited about it again. And, I wake up excited to like get started on things. And I love work. I love the weekends because I feel like it's my time to work without being interrupted. Um, and that to me is sort of like an indicator of where I am mentally with work usually.
mhm. Wanting to work on the weekends.
Yeah, like looking forward to it. I'm like, oh, it's almost like, especially Sunday. I feel like it's usually my day. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for the things I'm going to do tomorrow.
We hit a wall this time last year, and it sounds like you had about 6 months to explore. What did that look like, if you don't mind sharing? Just because a
Yeah.
lot of times people do hit that wall, and it sounds like you were able to successfully navigate that and get maybe the unspoken support that you needed. So, can you talk to us about that and what you found most helpful?
Yes. Um, so I cried a lot, honestly. That was part of my journey. I let myself feel the feelings. I don't know what I was grieving exactly.
Mm,
But I was definitely grieving something, maybe, I don't know. And I leaned into that, which is maybe a little bit indulgent, but it was felt right for me for a while. And then
mhm,
I took a lot of contrary action, I would say. So like things that I didn't feel like doing, but I thought this is probably going to make me feel better eventually if I stick with it. So like it's all the cliche things. Like I started working out again. I got a trainer. I got a new therapist. I got an executive coach. Um, I also have a list of like my favorite books, like business books that I read when I need to like kind of get re-engaged, or podcasts, or different things that personally inspire me. So I
mhm,
re-engaged with those. And I would just commit. I would say, okay, look, I don't really feel like reading this book, but I'll do an Audible instead of reading it, and I'll do 30 minutes a day. And
mm,
you know, I I think I think it just takes time is what I feel like. I think all those things that I was doing helped, but I think at the end of the day, like my I just needed to recalibrate who I was. Like I felt like I was sort of stuck in the like as the girl. I started this company when I was 28 years old. Like I felt like I was stuck there. And I was 10 years later, I was 38. And I had I like my life had not evolved because all I had thought about and all I had focused on was work. And so like I needed to
Mhm.
sort of like refigure out who I was as a 38-year-old, right? I had no idea who I was, what I liked, what I wanted to do, how to spend my time, if I wasn't working. Like I didn't know any of it. And so that just took time and like patience and like grace for myself. And yeah, just sort of leaning into the hard parts. Like it was rough. I'm so grateful for where I am today because I can confidently say this is the happiest I've been in my life. And I feel like I'm showing up at work again. But for a while I wasn't. There was a lot of shame around that while I knew I needed to get my shit together. Excuse me.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Because I think we all experience at one point or many points throughout our life. It sounds like you had a really intense 10 years and that recalibration was required. And whether, you're a working mom and you just need some quiet time for a weekend, or you're a man working, X amount of hours building a business and you just need a reset like you needed, or I mean, there's so many different examples. Um, Whatever your gender, your orientation, your experience, whether it's a balance of family, friends, or just your evolution from a 28-year-old to a 38-year-old, like you had
Yeah.
shared. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
So you mentioned your personal journey with sobriety, and
Mhm.
how has that experience shaped you as a leader and influenced the culture at Lemon Light?
A lot, I would say. Um,
Okay.
Without going into like a huge history, but basically I was sober when I started Lemon Light. I got sober in my early 20s and I stayed sober for about 10 years, which is when I started the company. And it gave me the space to work like I was working, first of all. Like I was able to show up and work hard every day because, especially for me, like if I'm a little bit social, but I'm also not that social, especially when I'm not drinking. Drinking definitely kind of gives me that confidence, I guess, when I'm out. And so for a while, it was able to give me the space to just work like I was talking about. And then in COVID, in like the middle of COVID, I was like, you know what? Probably drink again. And so I started drinking and I drank for 3.5 years. Um, and for me, it wasn't good. Like I wasn't just like, I was still showing up to work. I was still, we were still growing the business. I was still, in my office every day. But definitely became like a shell of myself. And I definitely was not, I thought I was being productive, but I wasn't being as productive. Like it's very clear in hindsight. But in the moments I thought, oh, this is what we should be doing. Um, and I was drinking at work a lot. And when I was drinking at work, of course, that gave permission for other folks to drink at work. And so it became a drinking culture. And again, it wasn't like we were out of
Mm.
control, but it was very common for people to be drinking, in the later half of the day when it was getting closer to, to end and very common to do a lot of activities around drinking. Um, it didn't work for me. It's never worked for me, if I'm honest. And that was kind of part of my, I think, big awakening last year was like this. I'm not creating destruction because I was a lot more destructive in my early 20s around drinking. But I was like, but this is
Mhm.
definitely not. First of all, it's not sustainable. Like I can't drink like this and function as the human I want to be in any part of my life. And I knew what I needed to do, but it was really hard. Like if anyone's ever struggled with getting sober or like sobriety in general, like it was extremely hard. I tried to get sober for probably over a year before I finally got it again. Um, and there's so much exhaustion from that. Eventually it clicked again, and I'm so grateful. I've been sober now for 15 months again and feel great. the team is a lot more balanced now. I may be a little bit less social than I was those couple of years, but for me, it's what makes the most sense.
Good. That's great. And I do find that I mean I know you're not an advertising agency, but I do know advertising agencies, creative environments, they do tend to be very accepting of that drinking culture, and I know
Totally.
that does impact people's work experience and personal life as well. So I can't imagine you're alone in this experience.
Definitely not. Yeah, it's very common. I hear about it a lot. And I understand it because I've lived
Mhm.
through it. But for me, it wasn't right for me. The only
Mhm.
conclusion I have.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
So, what are some of the most rewarding aspects of your role at Lemon Light? And what keeps you motivated and passionate about the work you do?
Such a good question. One of the things that I'm most proud of that makes me
Hmm.
feel like so good is we have events. We have events every month, and we have a big party at the end of the year. And a lot of our team, like from years, like a decade of teammates, will come to these parties, whether they don't work here anymore, whether they left on their own accord or whether they were let go for any other reason. These people will still come back to these events, and to me, it is one of the most. It's like one of my most proud moments. It's like, you know what, this didn't make sense for any reason. It could for any number of reasons, but the relationship and the support transcended that, whatever that was at the end. Um, and that always, it's like one of the things that stays with me, I think, is remembering that like we're not just building
Hmm.
a company, like we're all humans and we have this one life and we're going through it together. And then I think the other things that get me excited is I love when things come together. Like, in
Hmm.
production, there's 100 steps for a customer, and then in the company, there's all these different departments, and they have to figure out how to operate on their, within their own department, and then cross functionally, and then obviously growing towards specific goals and objectives, and seeing things get accomplished. It sounds so simple, but seeing things that get accomplished that require so many people in an organization, it's what I think fuels me. I'm like, wow. I'm like, I'm like, honestly, like the thing I think the most is, I can't believe that worked. um, because it's crazy. Like what you focus on when you set a clear objective and you have a lot of smart people working toward it, it can get done. And I forget that
Hmm.
sometimes. And I'm always like delightfully surprised, like when things work out the way that we plan them. And that feels really good because it feels like, look, that wasn't an accident.
Hmm. It was intentional. You were
Yeah,
intentional.
exactly.
So you mentioned recently having an executive coach, and I'm sure that helps on many different elements of your capabilities as a leader and creating a life that you love as far as a person goes. And so you also mentioned intention. So, how much do you see mindset playing a role in your experience as a leader and a successful entrepreneur?
I think mindset is nice to have. Um, it makes you feel good when when you have the right mindset, or when you're in the right mind, like headspace, I guess is kind of what I'm thinking. Things feel better. But I think to be a
Hmm.
successful entrepreneur, successful anything, like you cannot rely on that to get things done. I think one of the most important things for any entrepreneur, really anyone, is to be action oriented, whether or not you feel like it. And so there are plenty of days where I still, I'm a lot more engaged right now, but there are days where I'm like, oh, I just don't really know. I don't really feel like doing what I'm supposed to do today. And so I've had a habit since I started the company. I keep a very clear to-do list, and those are broken down sometimes into very little steps. So that even when I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do, or I don't really want to do anything, it's like, all right, I'm just going to do these 5 tiny things so I can get into action,
Hmm.
regardless of how I feel. And I guess that is my mindset, which is like action over everything else. And that makes a big difference.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head of that's the difference between a successful entrepreneur and someone who has a great idea but doesn't get very far with it. It's regardless of feeling motivated or not,
Totally.
you're taking that action. You're showing up every day.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to
That's
trust the process sometimes.
Can you talk to me about that? Trusting the process.
Yeah. So like a lot of times when you start something new, like we just sort of revamped how we do OKRs, like objective and key
Mhm.
results as an executive team. And like when we were first, we started last quarter. And so when we were kind of restructuring everything, it felt so messy and like so like I was like, oh, like this does not feel good. Like we're having 4-hour meetings. Like this is crazy. And I remember just thinking, like, look, I did not invent this. Like this is a structure and a process that a lot of really smart people use. And I need to just trust that we are going to get to where we need to get, even if it's not as comfortable along the way. Um, and we did. It was really messy trying to restructure everything, but it felt so good now. It feels so good now because now going into what we just started this quarter, um, everything is so much cleaner. But so many times through that experience, I was like, I just want to go back to the old way. I just want to go back to the old way. But I had to trust that this was the right thing to do and to do it anyways. Because the truth is, I could always go back to the old way if it didn't work. But I'm so glad I didn't do it.
Yeah. And I think that's common as we're trudging towards something new, whether it's a new job because we just got laid off, or it's a new career because our career is irrelevant. We have those moments where we just want to go back because
Definitely.
we've been there. We know that success. We know it was a great experience if it was. But the truth is that there's something bigger and better in front of us if we can trust that we just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Exactly. That's why I love breaking things down into tiny steps because the little steps don't feel as scary sometimes.
That's great advice. That's wonderful. So as Lemon Light has grown, how have you adapted your leadership style to support the evolving needs of the business and your team?
It's not without effort. I thought that I would just sort of I thought that it would happen more naturally, I would say. And that wasn't the case, at least for me. Like there are some parts that of course do
Mhm.
evolve, I think, as you grow, but there are some parts that you have to be really intentional about that feel a little like in my like I felt like it was a little silly. Or I was like, oh, this I don't need to do that. Like we all know this, but it's not true.
Mhm.
And so I had to be really thoughtful about how to lead with more of a vision and higher level company objectives, and then think about like more ladders and how those like ladder up into those company objectives as opposed to just, oh, everyone kind of knows what we're trying to do this month, or like, um, we just sit around and talk about things over lunch and we kind of trust that everyone who's probably needs to know is probably there will kind of hear. Like it was very informal when you're smaller because you're all so close and you're just talking constantly about work and you're always just kind of together. But as you get bigger, that's not the case anymore. In fact, you're sometimes several levels disconnected from some people. And I think it's extremely important for the way that, like, for everyone in the organization to understand what we're working toward. And I did not know that for a long time, and it creates confusion and it creates resentment, I think, is what it leads to. And so I think you have to be, most people, if you explain something to them in a way that's logical and human, they can understand. They may not agree, but they can usually at least like, okay, I can see where your perspective is here. And also gives them
Mhm.
a space to share their own perspective. And I think that I had to learn how to be really intentional with that and more transparent, um, than I was used to previously.
And so how did you communicate your vision, or you and the co-founder's vision,
Yeah.
to everybody regularly to keep them on the same page and everybody moving towards the same objective?
Yeah. So it's a structured process. um, and so we have we have founder meetings once a month, roughly. We're really just sitting around with, it is pretty informal, but like the whole point is like, hey, are we still aligned on where we're going? Biggest picture. Then we have executive team meetings every other week where we are aligning on our OKRs. We're understanding what's going on within each department. We are making sure that, if something has changed at the top, has, that it's being filtered down to the executive team. Um,
Mhm.
then there's a broader leadership team, which the executive team works directly with, but same idea. They're taking their objectives and their key results, and then they're structuring those for their team, their manager level. And then once a month we have a all hands meeting called a first Friday meeting. So it's the first Friday of every month, and that's where we go through everything. We go through all of the, all of any, top of the quarter is always kind of the more like the heavier one, because we're talking about everything that's going on for that quarter or that year. We do a really big one at the beginning of the year. And then it's just communicating it over and over and over again. And then there's a lot of, it really comes down to making sure that the executive team and the leadership team is communicating with the individual contributors throughout the month, right? So you can do things, easy things like putting big goals on the wall, identifying like the most important goal for the entire company and putting that somewhere that we're measuring every single day, like gets everyone kind of like rallied around it. Sometimes that happens at a department level. It just depends on what the objectives are, but
Mhm.
you're just creating a lot of comms around it. And that's why I said sometimes it feels silly. It's like, oh, do I need to say this again? And it's like, yeah, probably, because like even though I'm thinking about it every day, they haven't thought about it since the last first Friday meeting.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So over communication, essentially.
Yeah.
To learn more inspiring tips from other creative business owners, be sure to watch this video. And if you are interested in empowering your mind so that you can go for your dreams, don't hesitate scheduling a complimentary information session with me. You can do it. I believe in you.